Hi, everyone. I'm David Kelley. I'm the founder of the Atlas Society and now one of its senior scholars. And I want to welcome you to the 108th, believe it, 108th episode of our weekly series, The Atlas Society Asks. The Atlas Society is a leading nonprofit organization introducing young people to the ideas of Ayn Rand in creative ways. Before we begin, I'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, Russell Hassan, who is the author of a new book, The Meaning of Life, Philosophy, Logic, Science, and Law, which you can check out in the description section of this video. I also want to remind those of you watching us on Zoom, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube to use the comment section to type in your questions, and we will try to get to as many questions as we can. It's my pleasure today to talk with Marsha Enright. Marsha is an educational entrepreneur, a writer, and speaker. She earned degrees in biology and psychology. In 1990, she's founded an award-winning Montessori school, which she ran for 27 years. Along the way, she has also been a prolific writer and speaker on a wide range of topics in education, psychology, and philosophy, to mention only a few areas of her expertise. In 2005, Marsha founded the Reason, Individualism, and Freedom Institute, RIFI, offering the Great Connections program, which includes great books, conversations, seminars, and overseas trips. I was privileged to be on one of those overseas trips 4 years ago. And she now has a new book on education coming out soon. We're going to talk about all of those programs as well as her background in objectivism, including, hang on, a meeting she had with Ayn Rand. But for now, I'll just say Marsha is a longtime friend. She was there at the beginning of TAS. It's a real treat for me, as well as an honor to have her with us today. Marsha, welcome.
Thank you so much, David. I really appreciate your comments and being invited to be interviewed.
Well, it's definitely our pleasure. And so let's get started with some questions. Let's start with the recent news about Reliance College, which you have started putting together. How did this initiative come together? What are your plans for the college?
Well, I could see what was going on in higher ed 20, 30 years ago. I mean, I've been clued in by Ayn Rand and her writings on education and what was happening in education, whether it was the articles on the New Left or the Comprachicos. And I was concerned about what was happening. Plus, I thought that people on our side of the philosophical spectrum had no college that really represented their way of approaching life or learning or anything like that. And I thought it would be good for us to have something like that, because if you know the history of colleges in the United States, almost all of them have been founded by groups who had specific points of view that they wanted to educate people about. So I founded a RIFI in 2005 to build a college, and I was working on that when the recession just came crashing down in 2009, and it dried up the capital. And so I changed and decided, actually Don Helpman suggested that I do a summer program, and that became the Great Connections. And so we've been running week-long programs like that for 14 years. I put everything I knew about optimal education into that program. And I have to say, I've been surprised at the results still, because most of the students come out after the week and they tell me that their life has been transformed by the program, because now the aim of the program is to teach them how to think for themselves and be able to think about any subject matter without an authority. And we do that in various ways, but they actually do feel like they can do that by the end of the program. And it changes their whole way of interacting with other people and being able to discuss ideas. So that's our Great Connections seminar, and we're running it this summer, July 23rd to the 30th. If anybody's interested, go to thegreatconnections.org/seminars.
Great. So back to Reliance. Do you have I understand you required some funding, get that going. Colleges are pretty expensive. And this is now going to be a residential college?
Yes. Yeah, we got a very large donation in December of 2020 that's enabled us to pursue the funding for a full college. The way we've set the program up, we're going to start small. We're only looking for 12.5 million to open the college and prove the concept. We'll start in rented space. I mean, we've proved the curriculum because the Great Connections program is basically a condensed version of the kind of curriculum that we would have. The aim of the program is to help people become autonomous and the entrepreneurs of their own lives, whether it's personal or professional. One of the ideas behind this is that if we want to change what's going on today, we want more autonomous people. We want people who are very skilled, knowledgeable, skilled in reasoning, knowledgeable about the history of the world, philosophy, and the important matters that we want to change, and be able to put their thought into action, whatever their career. So the idea is to develop more autonomous people who don't want to be ruled. So that's one of the ideas. And it's going to be residential. We won't have to be in charge of the residential aspect because there's a private dorm here in Chicago. We're in Chicago. We'll be in the Chicago area that people can use. And we'll start out in rented space and develop from there. We're looking for 50 students to start with and grow from there. And the big idea would be to grow to a liberal arts college of about 1,000 people, because you want a very small educational experience to give people an optimal experience. But we can always grow by having multiple colleges on the same campus, like the Claremont colleges or Oxford and Cambridge, colleges with slightly different flavors. And we also want to develop pretty soon after we start a continuing education program, because we think there's a lot of people out there who both are looking for what to do with their lives in a second career once they retire. And our program would be able to help them with that. And then that there are also people who are interested in these kinds of ideas and would like to be involved in cultural events in a location like the college, whether it's a lecture or a music event or something like that, especially in today's culture where you don't always get the most inspirational art that you'd like to.
Yeah, for sure. And in addition to students, you will need faculty. So are you recruiting faculty for the college?
Yes, I have several people in mind already, because we use a very special methodology, and we use this methodology because it really increases the students' reasoning ability and their self-confidence and their autonomy. And so whoever would be teaching there has to buy into that and has to work on the skills for that. So it won't be departmentalized. If people know about St. John's College in Annapolis, which it's not the same program as St. John's, but the idea is that you are studying classic texts and some important modern works. Of course, we will want to include any modern works. One of the things missing in so many colleges is looking at the modern works of the freedom movement. Ayn Rand is very important in that, and Mises, Hayek, the other writers, and modern science too. But anyway, at St. John's, it's not departmentalized. In fact, to make the methodology work, you want people who are not expert in a subject facilitating the discussion about a subject, because the teacher in this kind of seminar is supposed to be, the expert learner. And the problem is that in encouraging the students to ask questions about what you're reading and really guiding the students in that, instead of telling them what's in the text.
Marsha, that's really interesting. Your method, you've described as the Socratic Method, although I think you have a special version of that you've developed over the years, and including you're currently running a Socratic seminar on Ayn Rand's We the Living. Currently, right? Can you tell us more about
I have two programs online. So
perfect. So how did you get? How did you develop this Socratic method that you use in that you've been developing over the time that you've had the Great Connections program?
Well, when I was a kid, I really loved school, and I was frustrated by the other kids that were goofing around until I realized that they were goofing around because they were really unhappy in school. And I said to myself, well, I don't want that for my own kids. So I kind of had my eye out for that. I also didn't like the social atmosphere in traditional school. I had my eye out for, okay, what kind of program would be good? And when I was about 20, I read Beatrice Hesson's articles, The Montessori Method, in The Objectivist. And I said, oh, this sounds really good. This sounds like what I would like. So I then went and taught myself, read everything that she wrote and taught myself about Montessori, sent my children to a Montessori preschool in the neighborhood. And then because there was, long story short, to make sure that they got elementary as far as possible, I started the Council Montessori School. And I became very learned in the Montessori method, which is a philosophy of education that's individualized, it's developmentally oriented, and it's about teaching people how to be autonomous and how to follow make their life as good as possible. So I had that philosophy in mind and wanted to bring it up to the college level, which in the Montessori movement they had never done. So I started searching around for what methodologies would be good to use and would be in line with Montessori philosophy. And I discovered this idea of the Socratic seminar. I don't remember how I did, but I came across the book, The Habit of Thought by Michael Strong. And then I met him in person and talked to him about it. So that was my first introduction. And then through him, this was when I was looking for facilitators to help me with the first summer programs. I met Albert Loan, who now works at the Universidad Francisco Marroquín in Guatemala. He's an award-winning teacher in the ACT and MBA program there. And he started the Michael Polanyi College, Liberal Arts College at UFM. For people who don't know, this is the leading libertarian university in the world. And so I learned through him. He wasn't available to work with me, so he recommended this a friend of his, Andrew Humphreys. And so Andrew brought some of the extra things that were added to the Socratic seminars, the traditional Socratic seminars. And he and I together developed the specific methodology that we use in the Great Connections. Wow.
So this has been a real research project and inquiry project on your end to develop this. And so now let me ask you just a more basic question. What got you interested in education in the first place?
Well, it's what I said, that I was really loved learning and saw so many kids not loving learning, and that was a perplexity to me. And I'm interested in psychology. I mean, this was funny. It's something funny I hadn't realized until a few years ago, that I've been interested in psychology since I was about 9 years old. When I wanted to know, I was thinking about in our class, how did we go from talking about this to talking about that? And anyway, so it kind of went hand in glove with my interests, and I was very dedicated to wanting to make things wonderful for children.
Right, and especially your own children, because you mentioned that one of your goals or motives for starting Montessori school, which is already a huge undertaking, was to provide your kids an alternative to public schools.
Yeah, that was my main goal. Mhm.
Yeah. Wow. Is there, can I just ask you about the Montessori movement? I've known about, since B. Hessen wrote her articles, and there were other objectivist things on it back in the day. But yeah, my understanding is that the Montessori movement is not always clear about the original philosophy, the goals, and that there are some serious divisions. For those people who have kids and are looking at Montessori schools, is there anything you would recommend that they look for in particular?
Yes, if as a parent, you need to educate yourself about what Montessori is. And there's a few books that are very helpful. There's one called The Montessori Way by Tim Selden. And it basically outlines for parents what the method is about. There's another one that's very interesting called Montessori, the Science Behind the Genius. If you want to get into the scientific detail, because Montessori was the first woman doctor in Italy, and she came to her project with a very scientific approach. She was a genius for being able to objectively observe what was going on and draw conclusions from it. And what's happened is she came up with all kinds of things to do in the program that now research science has validated are the right way to teach children. So this is why I say she was such a genius about being able to objectively observe these things, because she did by direct observation. Mm-hmm. And she did she did some kinds of experiments within the classroom, but they were more like clinical experiments, that wasn't a double-blind study or anything. And anyway, 100 years later, a professor from the University of Virginia named Angeline Lillard researched. She knew everything about developmental research, and she analyzed the Montessori method from that point of view. And she wrote this book called Montessori, the Science Behind the Genius. And it systematically shows you what modern research recommends as the best ways to teach children, and then how the Montessori method fulfills those needs.
Well, thank you. I see that the Montessori Way is in the chat box now for those who have access to it. And
unfortunately, there's a lot of Montessori. Montessori in her time was considered herself a socialist. I'm convinced from a whole lot of things that if she were here today, she would realize that no, free markets are the way to best flourish. Part of the reason is because she put a big emphasis on children learning what their career place in life should be, their individual career. And she had younger adolescents work on developing businesses. So the 12 to 15-year-olds, she had them running a farm, growing food, selling it at at a farm stand. Mm-hmm. Running a bed and breakfast for their parents to come and visit. So she was very much about doing things in the market. But anyway, there's many Montessorians who have taken her political position and taken it to be, that's the attitude that you should have in a Montessori school. And what you want to look for is a Montessori school that's not very political. That you don't see them commenting very much about those kinds of things. And many of them nowadays have gone woke. I mean, some of the things they're doing just makes my skin crawl. I saw a Montessori school that was having 3-year-olds compare their skin color to construction paper.
Oh my God.
Don't pay attention to that stuff. I mean, they know that there's a difference in color, but they don't pay attention that it has anything to do with the person, Yeah. So anyway, so be careful about that. There is a group that is run by some objectivists called Higher Ground Education, and they now have 100 schools around the country. So they have a very good program, and Carrie Ann Biondi, one of our advisors, works for them actually as a middle school teacher now. And so they're a good group to look for. Otherwise, you want to know about enough about the program that when you go, you can see whether, are they using materials? How is the classroom organized? Are there no worksheets? That kind of thing. So.
Great. Thank you. That's fabulous advice from an expert. I know in our circles, Montessori education is still, very valued in principle, especially with public schools getting worse and worse. So, Marsha, let's shift gears for a minute. You mentioned you're reading B. Hessen's material back in the 60s. How did you get interested in objectivism in the first place?
I was a senior in high school in 1969, and my social studies teacher had the what's now called the Nolan chart. If people are familiar with this, it's the chart to chart out your political point of view, depending on how much you believe in personal freedom and how much you believe in economic freedom. So at the 0 point are totalitarians, and at that time when I was in high school, Ayn Rand was the only one in the quadrant that had believed in freedom, all freedom in personal and economic realm. And the teacher had us. I asked him, where did he get this? Because supposedly David Nolan invented it in 1970, and this was 1969. So I don't know. He couldn't remember, but he wanted us to read a novel by a person from two quadrants who represented the views of one of the quadrants, So I read Shoes of the Fisherman, which was a representative of kind of democratic liberal at that time. And then I read The Fountainhead. So that's like that. And I read The Fountainhead and I'm like, oh, this is what I've always thought, but really well organized.
Yeah, that's a common experience, I think.
Yeah.
I always believed that. I just didn't know how to say it.
Exactly, right?
But no, that's, I know the reaction intimately from my own experience and from talking to many others in this movement. But it's, the more I read Rand and the more I appreciate, no, I didn't believe that all the time.
No,
I didn't
of course.
understand a tenth of it. But yes, I take the point. So, well, you've been with the Atlas Society now for since the beginning, even a little before the beginning, as I recall. And you and John have been contributors, advisors, just and frequent speakers, writers. It's a long time, and we certainly value. I certainly appreciate that your long involvement. Do you have any favorite moments from your experience of summer seminars, events, talks, friends you made?
Well, my first one I would recommend is when you first started the Institute for Objectivist Studies, and you gave that initial talk in, I think it was in New York.
Yes.
And when George Walsh got up and said, "This is a home for homeless objectivists." I always remember that. He was so funny. And I remember one summer when the summer seminar was at Oberlin College, I hung out with him and Murray Frank a lot. And George Walsh was just hilarious to be with. But, generally the summer seminars were just fabulous because, people called them Rand Camp. You know that? No,
I didn't.
Yeah. Well, you know how there's the whole meme about band camp from American Pie and these other movies. What happened at band camp?
I am blissfully ignorant of popular culture.
Okay. No. So anyway, this is a joke on band camp, right? So it's Rand Camp. But it was generally really wonderful because you got a chance to talk about these ideas basically 24/7. You had wonderful presentations and you had a chance to talk to other people who were interested in the ideas morning, noon, and night. I mean, I remember that time we were in Vegas and we were all in the swimming pool at night, and we would alternate between being silly and talking philosophy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
It was just great fun, you know. And I don't know if you know this, but Arena Mueller wrote a whole little article about the post-Rand camp depression
Oh.
that people would have, that she had. You know, a lot of people felt that, you know, you would have stayed up all night. I mean, you wouldn't have gotten enough sleep to begin with. But then on top of that, you had a great time and you were just having fun all the time. And you did recreational things with people. And so when you went home and you had to go back to your normal life, it was depressing at first, you know. So
Yeah. No, I know. It was a lot of energy went into it on the part of participants as well as the organizers and speakers. I remember there's something about the kind of intimacy you have with people who share a common framework, but are, you know, feel free to argue about application of specific points. And that was, I think, one of our unique features. But it was also a social gathering, as you say. In fact, for about the first, I don't know, 12 years or so, we were averaging one marriage or, you know, serious relationship per year. Yeah, that's net of breakups. Yeah. So anyway, those are great memories. But let's go back to the your origin story as an objectivist. You did meet Ayn Rand back in the 60s, 70s.
It was, so I learned about, I read The Fountainhead in 69, so that was a year after she broke up with Brandon. But when I went to graduate school in New York, Peikoff and Blumenthal were giving lecture classes at the Statler Hilton, the same place that NBI had been run. And I attended all of them, and she was always there in the audience. And you could basically go up and talk to her. I mean, there was no barrier or anything like that. So I think the first thing I ever went up and talked to her about, and it seemed like not that many people were going up and talking to her. I don't know, maybe they were intimidated or something. And I knew she, you know, had this reputation for getting angry with people, but my attitude was, my mother yells at me all the time. So if Ayn Rand does, oh well. And
that's your Italian background, maybe.
Maybe, I don't know. But anyway, so I think the first question I went up and asked her about was, there was some later essay, and I'd have to find which one it was. And there was some comment she made in there that to me implied that animals had some kind of free will. And so I went up and talked to her. I asked her about that. I said, well, you said this in this essay, and it seemed to imply that they have free will. And so we started a conversation about that. And she thought they had a kind of ability, the higher animals, you know, to direct what they were doing. And then over the course of these, I would just go up to her all the time and I just constantly ask her questions, you know, and they were things from philosophy like that all the way to who would you cast for Atlas Shrugged. And she was very cute when I asked her that, because people would throw out suggestions and then she would bring up her suggestions. And in the middle of it, she says, now, this is the kind of conversation I like. And I thought that was funny. And I talked to her about jewelry and cats. I brought pictures of cats. Yes, I brought pictures of my cats and she looked at them. Yeah. So all kinds of things. I don't know. I was about 25. I don't know if she thought I was a lot younger, but she treated me very well. And always, I mean, I never got the sense that she was the great Ayn Rand and I was like some kind of minion or anything like that. It was always as if she was talking to you mind to mind, very serious, would listen very carefully to what you had to say and answer it. And even sometimes, you know, she would start answering something and I knew it wasn't what I asked, so I would stop and I'd reframe it. And she was great to talk to, and very cute. Like I said, cute about that. I remember one time I said to her, Victor Hugo wrote his first novel he wrote when he was 19 years old is a book called Hans of Iceland. And the hero of the book becomes the first of the Counts of Danishgold.
Oh, huh.
So I said to her, oh, I saw that you got that name from that book. Kind of like, I was thinking it's like a tribute to Victor Hugo. And she said, she seemed to get nervous, and she said, oh yes, but it wasn't plagiarism because there were really Counts of Danishgold. And I felt like it was because she didn't want to seem to be riding on Victor Hugo's coattails.
Nah.
You know, that was my sense of why she said that. And another time, and I would ask her things like, did you ever notice that the names of the good characters in her books have a lot of hard consonants? K's and D's and N's. If you look at Reardon, Rourke, Dagny, you know. So I asked her about that. I said, did you do that on purpose? And she said, no, I just like the way they sounded. So.
Shit, yeah. And that's right. I've noticed that as well. And the villains all have soft, sloppy names.
Yes, right. Almost comical a lot of times. Yeah.
Often, yeah. So did you ever cross paths with her? I mean, cross currents, you know, that. Yes.
One time. So her husband, Frank, at that point, if you knew anything about, well, anyway, her husband, Frank, I could tell was cognitively impaired.
Yeah.
He was having problems, and she was being very protective of him, you could tell. And one time I was waiting to talk to her. She was sitting in chairs, and Frank was on the end, and then it was her, and then she was talking to Blumenthal, I think. And as she was talking to Blumenthal, I was trying to make conversation with Frank. And he obviously was aphasic. In other words, he understood what I was saying, but he had a hard time talking, which is a very common condition that can happen. But I was asking him about his painting and things he was interested in. But she kept looking over at me, getting madder and madder.
Ooh.
And then all of a sudden she stops and she says, don't bother him. He's not an objectivist. He's my husband. I thought, well, you know, obviously she was being, first of all, she didn't know what we were talking about. She probably thought I was asking him, because I'd always asked her a lot of philosophical questions, that I was trying to talk to him about that. And secondly, I thought she was being very protective of him. So I kind of shrugged, you know, I told you my attitude. And I went off. And then during the next break in the lecture, she came over and found me. Now, I don't even know if she knew my name, but she came over and found me. And she said, please, darling, forgive me. I didn't know what you were talking about.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. And I thought it was very big of her. I mean, you know, this is what I mean. She was just always person to person. It wasn't like she was too important to straighten something out. It was important for her to make things right, you know. So.
Well, I'm guessing there was an element of trust that she had about you, and it just, you know, which she did not always express toward other people, and you know, often with good reason.
Sure,
lots of reasons not to trust others.
Well, I figured Frank straightened her out too.
Oh,
Frank told her, no, we weren't. She wasn't asking me any philosophical questions, you know.
Yeah.
So, but and one other thing that was kind of funny was one time I brought a copy of The Fountainhead for her to autograph, and she said, "To whom should it be autographed?" And I said, "To John Enright, is my husband." And she said, "That's a good name." And I thought it's because, you know, Roger Enright.
Yes, of course, yeah.
Right? Yeah. So, it was very funny.
Moving on, these are wonderful stories. Would probably talk forever about that, about those years. But over the years, back, you know, from then till now, you've written a lot of things on, you know, an amazing range of topics. I was just reading something that we published a while back on did Ayn Rand influence Ken Follett?
Oh, yeah.
That was a nice one. And so we're covering philosophy, psychology, literature, and what topics are you interested in now, or do you have any time for writing and thinking over and above all the educational work you're doing?
Oh, yeah, I jam writing in. I mean, lately I've written a couple of articles about higher education, but one of the things that's happened is I'm going to come out with a book that's a collection of my articles about education called Teaching Freedom, Why the How is as important as the What. And so it focuses on methodology. So that'll be coming out in the next month or two. And then I managed to jam in during the pandemic, work on philosophical topics that I've been thinking about for a long, long time, for decades, and that's philosophy of biology. So I'm going to be coming out with an article in the Journal of Ayn Rand Studies about a naturalistic explanation of the origin of life, consciousness, and meaning.
Really? Can you tell us more about that? Yeah, you're whetting my appetite.
Sure. So I don't know how much, I mean, it depends on how much people are aware of the history of philosophy of biology, but since the scientific revolution, and especially the successes in physics and mechanics, those ideas, the approach to biology has been what's called reductionist. In other words, that we have to reduce everything in biology to physics and chemistry to explain it. Except the problem is that you can't. And they've been trying to do this for a couple of centuries. So you can't really explain certain aspects of living things mechanically or in a reductive manner. And so what happens is then people start proposing, well, there must be some kind of, especially the goal-directed ability of living things, the fact that it can pursue goals. And living things can change the direction of what they're doing depending on what they need, for example. And this is a big perplexity, especially for non-conscious beings. How do you explain the fact that a non-conscious being can pursue goals? Because we tend to immediately think, well, you have to think of the goal and go after it. And so the problem has been that people say, oh, well, since mechanoreductionism can't explain that, then there must be some kind of spirit or élan vital, life force or something like that. So what I've done with what I propose is both explain what's gone on in biology and also come up with a naturalistic explanation for how living things, non-conscious living things, can pursue goals. And then also relate that to what is consciousness in a naturalistic manner. What kind of thing exactly is it? And then relate that to meaning in life.
Well, that's pretty ambitious, Marsha, and it's something that I've given a lot of thought to as well, the whole issue of reductionism versus the idea of emergent properties first in life and then in the nervous system, the brain, consciousness, and even in society. So, I look forward to the article.
I look forward to your criticisms.
All right. I will listen carefully and be rational.
Okay, thanks.
Even when we disagree. We're getting on toward a point when we want to start taking some questions. I see quite a few comments in the chat box, but I definitely want to ask you, I'm awestruck by how much you've accomplished as a teacher.
Oh, well, thank you.
An organizer, administrator, a writer, and speaker. and now, founding a college, which is something many, many people have thought about and even tried without too much success. And it sounds like you've got a really good shot at it. So here's the question. So a lot of young people who want to be intellectual activists, make a difference in the world based on their ideas, whether it's in education or other fields. But looking back, what advice can you give people who want to pursue a career like the one you had? What was it that made that possible?
Well, it's funny because I didn't really know what I wanted to do for a long, long time. At least that's the way I thought of it. But opportunities arose that were involved with what things I was interested in, or I made opportunities because I was pursuing some value, like the Montessori school. I think you have to have the attitude that if you're interested in something and you think something needs to be changed, you can't depend on other people to do it. So you need to take the initiative to spearhead it and not be daunted by the fact that it's new, it's different, other people don't necessarily agree. Become as knowledgeable as you can about what it is you want to do, so you have self-confidence in it. And then you have to be, of course, the typical alert for opportunities to do it. I had another thought about this too. Well, anyway, maybe it'll come back.
Yeah, well, what you're describing goes back to what you said about the entrepreneurial approach to life that is part of your educational mission to teach people. And that means that's a very individualist standpoint. Mm-hmm. And it means, involves autonomy and rationality, all of which are about the individual and what's happening inside that individual's mind and spirit. But a lot of opportunities arise from other people. Mm-hmm. And almost every activity, profession, and especially education involves lots of other people. So you clearly know how to make connections and talk to people and draw people to. Is there something about the social skills that you recommend?
Well, and I don't know how much this can be taught, but what I'm going to say, I think, is something people can actually work on, which is I have a natural tendency to be able to know people and see what they're good at and see what they're interested in, and then remember them so that when I want to get something done, I say, oh, that person would be good for that. And then I'll contact that person. And if it's an interesting project, they often will decide to become a part of it. The fact of the matter is there's a lot of people who want to do exciting, interesting things, but they're not necessarily good at organizing it themselves. So when somebody comes along and proposes something, there are a lot of people who are interested in working with you.
Okay, yeah. There's what I've always thought of as a kind of psychic division of labor, differences in skills, bents, interests, abilities that make people really good at some jobs and not at others. But finding those people, I know it was a challenge for the Atlas Society. But I think it's a challenge in any field.
Yeah.
So this is great. I want to look at, there are a lot of interesting comments here. Let me just see if I can get to the things that Lawrence may have sent. Did we get?
It's in the chat.
Okay. Well, here's a question from Tina Monroe on Twitter. What do you think is the biggest impediment to liberty in America today? Is it?
The ignorance about the ideas that are at the root of it, that founded our country and made it possible. And of course, the left has done this long march to the institutions, and they start very young with people, not helping them learn how to reason well. Because people who reason well and pay attention to the facts, it's pretty easy to convince them that, for example, capitalism is obviously the best organization for a society. If you know anything about history and the facts.
Yeah. And I would think everything you said about autonomy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's partly the ideas. Would you say it's partly the ideas, but partly also the characteristics and the outlook that are drilled into kids at a young age?
Yes.
Right.
I recommend everybody go back and read the Comprachicos.
Yeah.
In I think it's in The Return of the Primitive, in that book. I highly recommend it, because if you go read that, she's talking back in 1970 about what progressive education does to children.
Mm-hmm.
And everything she's saying there is what's happened today. When you see all these college kids who are like a mob, and they're all worried about, what other people think of them, and what ideas they're supposed to espouse, or what values they're supposed to espouse. And they don't seem to have a mind of their own. She explained what happens.
Yeah, that's a great recommendation. Let me ask a question. This is from Josh Faloni on Facebook. Speaking from a psychological perspective, do you think young people have shorter attention spans today? This is an issue that a lot of us have thought about.
I don't feel like I can speak generally. I don't know, because I've known a lot of young people who seem perfectly capable of sustaining long conversations and reading books or listening to long form podcasts. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I can speak to numbers or anything. I know certainly this obsession with their phones and with this internet interaction is really weird, I think. I mean, the fact that two people can be walking down the street, or they can be at dinner with each other and they don't talk to each other, but they're just on their phones talking to other people.
Yeah.
I think that's a very bizarre development. And the question is, why do they feel more comfortable doing that? More satisfied, or, or what, rather than talking to the person that they have right in front of them. So I think that's a real problem. So I don't know, attention span may be a part of it. I'm just not sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. You reminded me of something I saw at our summer seminar in 2002 at UCLA, and I was walking behind two women, both on their cell phones. And I was astounded when I realized I got close enough to hear anything. They were talking to each other.
On the phone?
On the phone. They were walking side by side. Anyway.
What is the deal with that,
I don't know. Do you want to, let me just see if another question that, okay. And, gosh, our conversation about reductionism elicited a lot of interest, but I'm going to stay away from that, because we'd be here the rest of today and into the rest of the week. So I wonder if I'll just ask you about any final thoughts on what the objectivist movement can do to progress, going back in a way to the question about liberty, you're clear about and really concentrated on education. Is there anything that would, if you could, wave a magic wand and what else could people do who are, say, in different fields?
Yeah, well, I think Rand was absolutely right that we're not going to succeed until we win the moral argument. And so I think we have to have lots of different ways in common parlance. We can't just use objectivist jargon. We have to find ways to talk in common parlance to people about why individualism, why free societies, why capitalism is the best way to live. I mean, there's a huge movement, interest in human flourishing now. I'm actually worried about the fact that that phrase is going to become meaningless because I just see it everywhere now. So there's a big interest in that. And interestingly, in positive psychology, the founder, one of the founders of that, Seligman, said that he realized after he did all this research in positive psychology, meaning what are the best ways to live, how do you become happy, that the ways that he discovered were actually all in Aristotelian ethics. And so, Aristotle's ethics is very closely related to Rand's. And I think that we have to find ways to talk to people in common parlance about and call to them, because most Americans are actually individualists, but they don't have the words for it. They don't have the concepts of it, And I personally think that learning how to talk in this very collaborative manner with other people is much more productive than debating. So this is one of the reasons why I'm very big on this Socratic seminar. It's about collaborative discussion to discover what the truth is. And then the other thing I think that really needs to be developed is artistic forms to convey the ideas. I mean, one of the reasons why Rand has been so successful in influencing so many millions of people is because she put it in artwork. And it's much easier for people to consume that way, people especially who aren't intellectuals. And because given her own argument about art, it's so hard to keep all those abstract ideas in your mind at once. Yeah. But if you have a concrete embodiment of it in a character or in an action or something like that, it's much easier to think about it. So, I mean, this is something the left is really good at, is putting their ideas into artistic productions, and our side hasn't been.
Well, it takes I think that could be possibly a matter of numbers, because doing good art is a huge skill and hard. Yes. And I've read too many novels or other things that are just sort of imitations of Rand's style. Yes. There are some great exceptions to that, but I want to go back to what you said about the moral. We have to win the moral argument. One of the things that was distinctive about Rand is that she did not just talk about themes of self-development and going for your goals and being adventurous and entrepreneurial in your life, but she said this is egoism, and altruism is wrong. It's bad. It's even vicious. And so by drawing that distinction explicitly, is something that, at least I've rarely seen in a lot of work that otherwise seems very, self-interested. Mm-hmm. So in your Socratic seminars, I know you've done, you had students reading and applying your method to the Objectivist Ethics and other works by Rand, where this is explicit. How do your students react? What kind of questions do they ask?
Well, it's interesting. Over the years, I think I've had the students read the Objectivist Ethics almost every year. They love the Objectivist Ethics. And one of the things they love about it is that it lays out this rational argument for why you need ethics. And it just opens their mind to how you should be thinking about ethics. And they generally love it. And many of them feel liberated by reading it. Not everybody agrees with it, of course, but I usually start them out with philosophy who needs it, to set their framework of, why should they be interested in these ideas to begin with. So it's, I haven't found people to be very oppositional about it. I'm trying to think of whether I've had anybody think they were all that controversial even.
No. What?
I don't, I barely remember. Yeah.
So even the people who were not convinced by the position or the arguments for it did not think, oh, this is vicious.
No.
Which is what you typically hear in references to Rand in popular media.
Well, but the thing is that, well, first of all, most of those people have read her, but they just like skimmed it. And I think what happens is that the people who are so vicious about it is because something is very threatening in her writings. They find something very threatening. In our Socratic seminar class, everybody reads the article, and then we come with our questions about, well, what does the author mean? And we chew over those questions together. And the students have to bring up facts. They have to point to different parts of the text, and we chew over, well, what does this mean? Or what does that mean? What does the author mean by this word or that word? And how does this all go together? And how does it apply to your life? And so when you're doing that, you're taking a very charitable attitude towards the author, whoever we're reading. And you're saying, you're trying to understand first before you evaluate or criticize.
Right.
And so it gives you a different mindset, I think, than if you're just reading it kind of yourself and you come across something you don't like. You have an opportunity to, if you're confused or you don't like something that the author said, you have a chance to talk it over. Did I really understand?
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Right. If we could port that perspective into every school in the country, we would live in a freer country. Absolutely. So I'm sorry, we need to start wrapping up. Thank you, Marsha, so much. Thanks to all of you who put questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to very many of them, but we will. I will certainly want to look at all the comments, and I could share them with you, Marsha. But for now,
well, may I just say, if people want to contact me, they can email me at marsha@reliancecollege.org.
Perfect.
And we can put some information in the chat, right? I mean, in the comments section about contact information and things like that.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
The comment section will stay live only while the session goes, I believe. Our behind the scenes guru on this kind of thing, Lawrence Olivio, can confirm or disconfirm that point, but we'll make it available. Yes. And we can send out I just heard from him that, yep, I can do that. So we'll make that'll certainly be available. And meanwhile, thanks for your email address. And the do we have the Reliance College website?
It's reliancecollege.org.
Okay, that's easy. So I think this is a very great achievement, Marsha, very hopeful, and best of luck with it.
Thank you.
And I urge everyone who's interested to follow up, get in touch. And I'm sure you'd be happy to provide people with ways if they want to support it.
Oh, more than happy.
So,
Yes.
yeah.
Thank you for the
Okay.
opportunity to talk to you too. I really enjoyed it.
Great. Me too. So thanks. And thanks to all of you for joining us today. And if you enjoyed this video or for that matter, any of our other materials, please consider a tax-deductible contribution at atlassociety.org. And be sure to tune in next week when the Atlas Society Asks. We'll have Ian Miller as our guest. Information about that will be on our website. So thanks, everyone. Thank you again, Marsha.
Thank you.